The Lonely Lake Monster, Chapter 6. The Return of Mr. Tabby. The hospital lobby was big and empty. Cobwebs crisscrossed the high ceiling. A door marked Employees Only stood on one side. A door marked Identification Room stood on the other side. Both doors were closed. An elevator waited. "Where'd Dr. Wu go?" Pearl asked, stepping over her box of jelly beans. "I don't know," Ben said. He picked up the other box, which had tumbled from his hands when he fell, and set it on top of Pearl's. "Well, what do we do now?" She didn't want to do the wrong thing and get into trouble on her first day. "Maybe we should wait," Ben said with a shrug. Pearl tapped her feet and popped some bubbles with her gum. Where had the doctor gone? This wasn't fun. The first day of their apprenticeships was supposed to be fun. "I hate waiting," she grumbled. "It seems like forever." "It's only been a minute," Ben informed her. A minute can be a very, very long time. Pearl charged over to the identification room door and tried to push it open. "Locked," she reported. Then she checked the employees only door. "This one's locked too." She rapped her knuckles on the door. "Hello? Did you forget about us? Hello?" Ben pressed his ear to the employees only door. "I don't hear anything." Pearl knocked louder. "Hello? Why are you two making such a racket?" Both Pearl and Ben gasped, surprised by the voice that came from the other side of the lobby. They whipped around. The identification room door had opened, and an odd-looking man stood in the doorway. A big grin spread across Pearl's face. "Hi, Mr. Tabby." Both she and Ben knew him. He'd examined the dragon hatchling when they'd brought it to the hospital. He told them it was called a wyvern, a special two-legged dragon that grew a barbed tail. He'd also given them a Sasquatch catching kit so they could bring the big, hairy beast back to the hospital. Pearl thought Mr. Tabby looked like a butler in his perfectly creased black pants, white shirt, plaid vest, and shiny black shoes. Long red hair was pulled into a ponytail, and a red mustache perched beneath his nose. But it was no ordinary mustache. It was waxed into sections and reminded Pearl of a cat's whiskers. How much time does it take each morning to do that, she wondered. "Do those boxes contain kiwi-flavored jelly beans?" he asked. Pearl and Ben nodded. "I'd find it most helpful if you'd set them in the elevator." Once they'd done this, the doors closed, carrying the boxes upward. The panel above the elevator lit up, floor 1, 2, 3, and stopped on 4. "What's on the 4th floor?" Pearl asked. "Is that where the fairies are?" Acting as if he hadn't heard the question, Mr. Tabby sniffed the air. "Do I detect an odor of parakeet?" He sniffed Pearl's head. "Yes, indeed I do." Known world variety, male. His half-moon irises expanded. "Do you own such a creature?" "Yes," Pearl said. "His name is Lemonface." "Parakeets are delicious with mustard." Mr. Tabby said this as if it were normal to eat parakeets with mustard. Pearl frowned and made a mental note to never, ever let Mr. Tabby near Lemonface. "I also detect the odor of fruit-flavored chewing gum. Gum is not allowed on hospital grounds. Please deposit it into the receptacle." He pointed to a small trash can. Both Pearl and Ben spat out their gum. Then Ben shuffled in place. "Where's Dr. Wu?" he asked. "Dr. Wu has been called away on an emergency, and therefore your first day of apprentice training will fall on my shoulders." He stroked a section of his mustache. "It is unfortunate timing, but we must make the best of it." Pearl didn't know Mr. Tabby very well, but from the short time she'd spent with him, she'd come to the conclusion that he was rather grumpy. What kind of teacher would he make? She opened her mouth to speak, and as she did, a low growl sounded in Mr. Tabby's throat. "Will your question be of the bothersome variety?" he asked, folding his arms. Pearl screwed up her face. She didn't have one question, she had many. And they weren't bothersome, they were important. So despite Mr. Tabby's stern look, she went for it. What kind of emergency did Dr. Wu go on? Did she go to the imaginary world? Can we go with her? What kind of creature is sick? Can we meet it? Is it going to die? If we are her apprentices, then shouldn't we be with her? Isn't that our job? And perhaps you do not know the definition of bothersome. Mr. Tabby narrowed his eyes. Please choose one question. Ben stepped forward. What are we going to do today? Now that is a question I can answer. Follow me. He strode to the employees-only door. The last time Pearl and Ben saw Mr. Tabby, a tail had slid out the bottom of his vest. Pearl watched carefully, looking for a hint of the furry appendage, but nothing appeared. She thought about asking him if he had a tail, but changed her mind. That was probably bothersome. Mr. Tabby placed his hand on the door, his long fingers spread wide. The door hummed and clicked open. It must have read his fingerprints, Ben whispered to Pearl as they followed Mr. Tabby through the doorway. My dad has a security system at his office that reads fingerprints. Cool. The door closed behind them. They stood in a hallway. It looked like a regular, boring hallway that could have been in a regular, boring building. But this was a hospital for imaginary creatures. This hallway should be different. Disappointment settled over Pearl like a wet blanket. Where was the magic, the wonder? Where were the fairies and their dust? Pay close attention, Mr. Tabby said. He stood in front of a bulletin board. One side of the board was labeled off duty, and the other side was labeled on duty. Mr. Tabby removed 2 cards from the off-duty side. One card had Pearl's name written on it, the other Ben's name. The remaining card belonged to someone named Vinny. These are your time cards, Mr. Tabby explained. You will clock in when you arrive and clock out when you leave. He took Pearl's card and slid it into a clock that hung next to the bulletin board. A click sounded. The day's date and time were now printed at the top of the card. He slid Ben's into the slot and the same thing happened. Then he pinned each card to the on-duty side of the board, next to one labeled Mr. Tabby and another one labeled Violet. Who are Vinny and Violet? Pearl asked. Violet and Vinny work for Dr. Wu, and that is all you need to know. Mr. Tabby straightened the time cards so they were perfectly parallel. It is extremely important that you clock in and out. That is the best way for us to keep track of you. The previous apprentice always forgot to use the time clock and... He paused. We lost her. What do you mean you lost her? Ben asked. Mr. Tabby's upper lip rose in a slight sneer. Because she neglected to clock in and clock out, we do not know if she disappeared in the known world or the imaginary world. Disappeared? A shiver ran down Pearl's spine. Are you telling us that she's missing?